How you all doing, ladies and gentlemen? So here today with the second mini war from OverSimplified. I was gonna say oversimplified.com, but rather it's the Oversimplified YouTube site channel. A reaction to the football war. Now, I love football. Truly, I love football. So the title of this has me very intrigued. Now, my assumption is that it is World War One. The match between England and Germany. That's my guess right now. That's the war that they're talking about. But let us see what MiniWars number 2 has in store for us, ladies and gentlemen.
You have 2 seconds to name these two countries.
Bolivia?
You're wrong, unless you got it right. Then good job. They are, of course, Honduras and El Salvador.
No.
One thing these two countries have in common is being fanatic about football.
I was sort
Or
of
if you're
close.
a freedom-loving patriot, soccer. But do they love it so much they would go to war over it? You bet they would, and that is no bueno.
Okay, definitely not the war that I've had in mind. So it's not what I
If you
thought it
look at
was.
these two countries, you might notice one major difference, and that is that this one is a lot bigger than this one. However, this one had a larger population than this one, made up mostly of farmers, and there wasn't enough land for them to live and work on. So
Okay.
they started moving from El Salvador to Honduras in search of land, and by the 1960s, a huge number of illegal immigrants had crossed over the border from
Okay,
El Salvador.
okay.
Meanwhile, in Honduras, it's 1963, and this guy has just staged a military coup to prevent the rise of communism, and is now the military leader of the country. He
Going
immediately
sort of
began
fast.
harassing the peasant unions and other left-wing groups, but he's a little insecure about the legitimacy of his leadership. So he holds an election and wins, but then the opposing party says, hey man, that election was clearly corrupt and fraudulent, and also you've been bribed by the rich American banana companies who are taking all of our bananas tax-free, and now our economy is in ruins.
Not
And
those
everyone's starting
bananas.
to get mad at him. Now, if you ever find yourself the barely legitimate military leader of a corrupt Central
Start
American
a war.
country, and you start getting into hot water, here's a bit of advice that has been tried and tested throughout the centuries. Blame something else. So he blamed the Salvadoran immigrants for
Okay.
stealing all the land and all the jobs and ruining Honduras. The immigrants found themselves under attack by the hostile locals, egged on by the rich American banana companies who wanted all the bananas to themselves.
Yeah.
The Honduran government began evicting Salvadoran immigrants who had been living on the land for generations and started sending them back to El Salvador. The Salvadoran elite were furious and protested, citing moral reasons, but in reality, they were just getting a little too crowded. So tensions were about as high as they could be, but then
How does football come into this? Sudan.
it's the 1970 World Cup qualifiers, and both countries
Mexico.
finished top of their qualifying table, so it was now time for them to play against each other in a series of matches. The first match took place in Honduras. The night before the game, Honduras...
Who won in 1970? Was it? It was Argentina, right? That won in 1970, and then 74 it was Germany. Football crazy. I'm telling you. Okay, I got the premise for this war. Immigration. I mean, this whole video actually seemed like a parody of like the days that the days that are happening nowadays. In pretty much most European countries, not as much nowadays, I guess, anymore as it was like 2, 3, 4 years ago. The mass immigration that was happening. And I guess to a certain extent, you could also make the parallel to America, of course, with their immigration problems. And when I say problems, I'm talking about from all sides, I guess. The government as well as the immigrations, that are, the illegal immigrations that were actually happening. So I got the premise for all this. I get that the World Cup is happening, this 1970 World Cup. But the title just has me confused. Football war. Football war. Football war. Let's see.
Friends gathered outside the Salvadoran team's hotel, making noise and taunting them. The next day, Honduras defeated the exhausted Salvadorans with a late 90th minute goal.
Oh.
After the match, a young Salvadoran fan, unable to bear her country's defeat, shot herself. Disturbingly, the Salvadoran government glorified the incident and made her into a national hero. And at the
Whoa. Really? Philotex. Philotex. This is Philotex. Don't read it. I'm gonna copy and paste this in a second. Okay, here we go. A B C D Philitex. Okay, that's just the same thing over and over and over again. I think. Yeah, I don't see it being any different. Yeah, okay. National hero Amelia Bolanos. You see, that's extreme.
Next game, fans brought pictures of her to the stadium. Emotions were running high as the next match took place in El Salvador, and this time the tables returned. The Hondurans had to endure a sleepless night in their hotel, and the next day, before the match started, instead of the Honduran flag, the Salvadorans raised a dirty rag. So great job at reducing tension. El Salvador won decisively over the exhausted Hondurans. While spectators battled in the stands, Team Honduras fled home in a bulletproof bus with rocks being thrown at them, and the Honduran coach reportedly told his players that they were lucky they lost. In response to the defeat, Hondurans began terrorizing the Salvadoran settlers even more, in some cases reportedly throwing them off their land and burning down their homes, and the immigrants began fleeing back to El Salvador.
That's
the
brutal.
final game in Mexico would decide who went to the World Cup. It was close, but El Salvador came out victorious, knocking Honduras out of the tournament. The atmosphere is riotous, literally, and back in Honduras, attacks on the Salvadoran immigrants further increased. This was too much for El Salvador to bear. With its people under attack and an unmanageable refugee crisis on its hands, El Salvador severed all diplomatic ties with Honduras and declared war.
They call it the beautiful game, but then look at this. I shouldn't be laughing, honestly, but it's hilarious. I'm sorry, it's hilarious, alright? I shouldn't be laughing about this, but it's hilarious. That football was the cause of all that. Hey, you know what? It wasn't the prime cause. Right? It was certainly a. It certainly lit the flames, but it wasn't. It wasn't the matchstick, right? I guess that analogy is kind of terrible. It wasn't the paper that was lit. It was just the stick that was holding the fire. I think that might be better. Half an analogy.
The football war is also known as the 100 Hours War, because that's how long it lasted, making it one of the shortest wars in history.
Hey, I mean,
El Salvador started by carrying out air raids on strategic locations within Honduras, including Toncontin International Airport.
How brutal was
it?
it?
The Honduran Air Force from getting into the sky. Then, with their superior army, they began an invasion along two major roads, complete with light tanks and infantry.
How many people died?
Their advance was rapid, and they were quickly approaching the Honduran capital. Then, the Organization of American States met in a bit of a panic and unanimously agreed that war between El Salvador and Honduras was a bad thing and probably shouldn't continue.
Yep.
So they went to El Salvador and said, "Can you please stop invading?" And
No.
El Salvador declared, "Not until they stop being jerks," and so the war went on. The Honduran Air Force finally got into the sky, and with aid from neighboring Nicaragua, they successfully carried out air raids on Salvadoran air bases and oil facilities, crippling the Salvadoran supply line and stopping their advance dead.
Okay,
Caught
fourth
within
day.
a stalemate, the situation was no longer advantageous
96
to El Salvador.
hours.
So when the Organization of American States once again asked them to stop and agreed to ensure the safety of the Salvadoran immigrants, El Salvador relented, and a ceasefire was organized on the 18th of July. Then the OAS said, "Can you now please withdraw your troops from Honduras? No, please, no, please, no, please, no. Do it or we'll sanction you." You know what? Just for you, I'll do it. So El Salvador pulled its troops out of Honduras on the 2nd of August, and with casualties in the thousands, the war was over. The economies of both nations were damaged by the war, and El Salvador didn't have the capability to take care of all the returning immigrants, a crisis that eventually helped cause a civil war. The war left behind land and border disputes, some of which are still a cause of tension to this day. El Salvador went on to play in the World Cup, but lost every match they played and didn't make it past the group stage. So in the end, nobody achieved anything, and there were no winners. Except for this guy.
And just a little thing pops up on the top. Get your merch. Alright. That was a short video. Very enjoyable though. As always from the dudes from OverSimplified. Very good videos. On a topic I had no clue about. Football war. Football. If somebody came up to you and said, "Oh yeah, do you know the football war?" You'd be like, "World War I? No, the football war." Like no. Like most people wouldn't be able to tell you what this was. So this was one of those that I had absolutely no idea about. Despite being a football fan. Probably just because it's way before my time. But the point that I'm trying to make here is this. It's kind of insane how like the tiniest things can spark a war, even though it was 100 hour. Granted, we didn't also find out the casualties. It could have been a 100 hour war, but extremely brutal, or it could have been 100 hour war where we only found out, okay, they destroyed things, they started invading, but well, I guess they invaded parts of it. That is probably a better way to phrase it. But like they didn't really talk about how many people actually died, the casualties. So I don't know whether it was a brutal war or not. Obviously, it then later on caused a civil war, the precursor of a civil war. But, I like finding out about this, to be honest. I like finding out about this. Things like this, I'm always a fan of. So let's see what mini war number 3 is all about, ladies and gentlemen. These will be coming out daily. I'm going to be recording like 5 or 6 videos today and then just kind of uploading them for the rest of the week. But yeah, I'll be seeing you all in the next one, everyone. Until then, have a nice day. Be sure to, of course, rate, comment, favorite, and subscribe. And I'll see you all in the next one, everyone. Peace out and